part of what this company is about is sharing things that people have never had and sharing familiar favorites like Earl's chocolate peanut butter, which is a take on just a classic favorite.
Good Monday morning. Have you ever wondered how successful and happy people got their starts? Every success story begins somewhere, often more humbly than you'd expect. I'm Leilani Brown, host of Your First Job, the podcast. Good Monday morning, everyone. I'm Leilani Brown, and welcome to Your First Job. I have a literal and figurative treat for you today. I am speaking to Paul Nasrani, who is the CEO and founder of Adirondack Creamery, which is the first, I think, farm to freezer small batch creamery offering the most delicious ice cream. Before Paul was founder and CEO, because who doesn't love ice cream? Before Paul was founder and CEO of Adirondack Creamery, he was the chief financial officer for a legal services business in New York and so much more. But in a twist of events, I have ice cream. I have ice cream for breakfast. And so I have looped in my new friend, Ashley, and we are going to taste it live in front of Paul. And I'm really excited because I have a lot of different flavors here. So with that, good morning. Hey, Paul.
Good morning.
How
Thank
are
you
you?
for having me on. And there is nothing better than doing a virtual but real tasting of
A
ice cream.
virtual but real tasting. So full disclosure, I've had these shipped to me to where I am on Saturday, and so I did taste some. But there's one that I waited to taste because it is reminiscent of a childhood stories. But Ashley, I'm going to give you the right of first refusal for some of these very interesting flavors, and one of them is pretty standard. So there is High Peak Perk coffee bean. I don't know if you like coffee ice cream. There's Kashmiri Kawa, which is quickly becoming one of my favorites, Paul. So we have that.
It's one of
We
our
have
newest flavors.
Earl's chocolate peanut butter, which is named after the person who got you into ice cream making. So
Yep.
I'm going to talk about that. There's black raspberry, the long-awaited black raspberry, which I'm really excited about, and I have a personal story. And then there's Syrian date and walnut, which is it a relatively new flavor?
No, actually, that's been around for a little while. That
Yeah,
started
and
in
it's really, really interesting. So Ashley, where do you want to start?
Um, how about the walnut?
Okay, so go ahead. I brought a big spoon from my kitchen and proper bowls, and go ahead and start there. And then I'm going to open up the black raspberry. So, Paul, as we get started in all of this, did you think when you were graduating from college that you'd be having a podcast recording focused on, yeah, I'll have a little bit, focused on ice cream making?
That was never ever in the possibility of in my mind. It was in the back of my mind a possibility that I would own an ice cream someday, since that was always in my mind since childhood. So that was there. Maybe it was not in the front of the mind, especially when I graduated. But yeah, doing a podcast online certainly wasn't. I was focused on becoming a public accountant and being a business leader and being on the cover of Business Week magazine back in the days when they had magazines.
Definitely. I mean, well, you may end up there anyway because of the ice cream empire that you're building. Okay, a pause for the cause. The proof is in the pudding. Let's see what
I'll
we are.
say so. We've got black raspberry and Syrian. There's both really special stories behind each of these. I'm happy to share the stories of both of them. But, let me know.
Okay, the black raspberry is so good.
I really do like it.
I love it. I love it.
So yeah, so that black raspberry, is a very special flavor because we did the cover has this map of the United States that's purple, and this we did a while ago. It was the midterms of 2018, and we did it because personally, I'm like, we're not a country of red states or blue states, and who knew that this would be even more relevant today than it was at those midterms. And the story was that look, ice cream, first of all, it's purple, which is the mix of red and blue, but ice cream even with a neighbor. And I got even some media coverage to go out and say, look, you should talk to your neighbor who doesn't have a sign out front for the candidate that you love. Maybe you don't want to vote for that candidate, but you could share some. You're still neighbors.
So
And
you're
ice
using ice
cream
cream as a bridge,
as a
essentially.
bridge. And you may not agree. I always leave the leave that you may not agree at the end, but you could agree that this is really great ice cream. So you'll find
Yeah.
something to find with a neighbor.
How timely. And I think even if you move out of the political discussion, using food as a bridge for communication and connection. I mean, Ashley, we just met.
This is a perfect example of that. Food shared across a table. It not only bridges divides, it opens discussion, or you meet new people, and it's a wonderful medium. And my medium happens to be ice cream, so it's even more wonderful because
Yeah,
most people love to taste ice cream.
fantastic. What do you think, by the way?
I love the raspberry.
Love
Or-
the raspberry.
And then walnut. I do love walnut.
Okay, good. So you have one more moment to try
Okay.
two more. We're digging into the Kashmiri kawa, and then we'll get back to our regular program.
Yes. We're to talk about ice cream. Yes, Kashmiri Kava is a really special. That's actually from Kashmir, where my wife is
So
from, and it's
this is
from
the shops. Okay, tell me
there's
that story.
There's it's so when you go to someone's home in Kashmir, they offer you usually a drink, which is this steeped cardamom powder or cardamom pods, cinnamon sticks, saffron, and sometimes pieces of cloves. So it's a really welcoming, warming drink. And so, I wanted to figure out, and my wife was like, "We got to figure out how to make that into ice cream." And it's such a great story to share and tradition. And it's also a flavor that never has been on the market before. And so we turned this ice cream flavor to reflect those spices, and it has a lot of those same qualities. And it has an interesting name. It's a flavor people haven't had, and it's our number one. It's already rocket. It's our number one seller at Wegmans, which is a big, very well known 100 store chain we do work with. So it's awesome. That's part of what this company's about is sharing things that people have never had and sharing familiar favorites like
Yeah.
Earl's chocolate peanut butter, which is a take on just a classic
I'm
favorite. The farmer where I spent time as a kid working on the farm in my high school days, his name was Earl, and he made this fantastic peanut butter fudge and ice cream. He taught me how to make ice cream, and we'd make it with a hand crank machine. And it stuck in my mind the joy of doing that. But he made this peanut butter fudge that was just spectacular. And we gave it out on holidays and shared it with people. But when he passed away, no one had the recipe. And so his grandson, who's my age, and now has been part of my business for a long time, he kept making the fudge until the recipe, everybody agreed that was it. And originally, we used that fudge in the ice cream. So it was a great story to share. It was
I
really,
love this. I'm going to close it up, but for encouraging Ashley to take whatever container you want.
Thank you for having me.
thank you.
Let's just start at the beginning. So I just want to reset now that I've had my ice cream. Describe for me, if I just met you, what is the job of the CEO of Adirondack Creamery? How do you describe what you do today to anyone that you meet?
I mean, today it ranges from the level of look, how do we sell to large customers? How do we meet with meaning large chain grocery stores? How do we interact with them? How do we share our story? We're a tiny company. We're not Nestle or Unilever or backed by hundreds of millions of dollars. So like sharing the story, but then that's on one level, and then the other level is I'm into the woods of. Did we manage our production right this week, and working with my team and the farmers and seeing how we did, and then creating a flavor. Creating a new flavor comes from a lot of inspirations, and like we are not running a lab with a lot of, and although I have respect and know a lot of people who are in scientific tasting labs, it's often in the kitchen with the neighbors and creating something that we think can end up going to market. And like Kashmiri Kava, which we just tasted, came from my
Right.
own life experience and from my wife. So creating new flavors, creating relationships, and then telling the story is a really big part of this. Is how do we tell the story and share and market what we're doing? In the old days when we started, I was putting a lid with one other person, two guys, a lid on every pint, and putting the stickers on it. Fortunately, from the very beginning, doing all these tiny, little pieces to make this work. I've done all of them, and now I have people who are better than me at all of those things. For
Right.
10 years, I ran an ice cream plant, and now I really have a vision of how that works and how I can help to manage the people that run the plants. But I don't have to do it because I just never was that good. I learned a lot.
You got a
And
promotion.
the
You got
farmer
a
told me when I started, he said, Paul, in 10 years, you might know what you're doing here. And he was right.
right, right.
So, yeah, it's a full range of responsibilities, but
Yeah.
I enjoy all of them.
I'm curious, when did you know, at what stage, because you've been doing this a while and you still consider yourself and are considered in some circles a smaller business or enterprise. How did you know when to start to add people to to the organization? And I asked that question both on the career front for folks who are exploring entrepreneurship and scaling and how to do that, but also for people who are further into their journey, who are holding on to the responsibilities and the processes so tightly and might be a little bit afraid. And I'm talking about people, I'm including myself
Mhm.
as a CEO. When did you know that you started to say, okay, I need to expand in order to grow, I have to expand in this way?
There's a point where you start to lose opportunities. It was really clear, like a big thing for us. There's many of these that I went through along the way, but one of the major ones was running the plant. We had this crazy story of how I found a dairy where we had all the ice cream equipment, and we had an opportunity of a lifetime to run this factory. The equipment was already there, and we did it for 9 years. And I did it. I started by myself, and then I called my childhood friend who was from a farm. He's a better. That was one moment. He was a better mechanic than I am, and this was like equipment. How do I fix this stuff? And I could have figured out. And I needed his help because he's really a great mechanic. So it was the two of us. But we did that for years, and we hired people. We had people drive trucks and things like that. But there was a huge change. Was when we started to grow out of that plan. And it was, do we build our own and continue doing this, or do we work with another group? In essence, hiring an employee, hiring really a shift and turning over the responsibility of making the ice cream to the farmers and to a group that does it. And I had a lot of trepidation about doing it. And it was the best thing we ever did from 2 points. One, these were folks that have been doing this for 30 and 40 years. And I started to realize they really, really knew better than I did and could add value in somewhere where I thought I knew everything, but I much more value in what their skills was amazing. And
Right,
it also made our business much more financially sustainable. And it's really hard because when you're a small business and you're really, money is an issue all the time, and you're trying to, how do I do it? Well, maybe it's cheaper if I do it myself. And I have to remind myself of this often. But
yeah,
it's, what? Our business is much more sustainable and has grown only because that one example of, now working with someone else. And the same is now bringing someone on to help run operations. I've always talked to all the stores and all, and you know what? It's better to have someone else. They have a new perspective. They don't do it the way that I would do it. That's
right,
true. And that's a hard part. How do
right,
you get comfortable with that? It's not
right,
going to be the way. So I've learned from experience, you take the positive of what they're adding, and if there's something that you think is needs to be tweaked, then it's a learning lesson and teach them. And I've seen people grow over time, and I'm like, wow, you write the message better than I would have written it.
right,
And a long time ago, I would
right.
have wanted to write that message or
Or
that script.
sometimes you're too close to it, right? Like
You're in the woods.
you're in the
You're,
woods.
you're in the woods, and it's very hard. Like it is to this day, it still is. So I think you have to keep reminding yourself and accept people that they aren't you, especially when you're a small business owner, you're a founder. You know, that's okay. That's
Right.
okay. But it's the only way. And you know what? You become, I believe, a better business person. And it's not just about growth. It's more fun in the end of the day.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
It really is.
I I would have to imagine you're leveraging what your experiences were in finance and as a senior leader of a business and also as a CFO. Uh, one of the I want to ask about that experience and what that journey was for you, but I want to jump to the watershed moment when you left being a CFO and a C-suite executive for a business to start your own. Did something happen, or did the business grow to a place where it made sense, or did you find yourself without a job? And I ask that question because right now we're seeing across every single industry and sector job transitions and job loss. And sometimes those things can be daunting, but sometimes they can be new opportunities. What made the shift? What caused the shift for you?
Um, the shift had no reasonable explanation whatsoever. It was, I will be, upfront honest, when it was a very stressful time in my role, we were going through a transition. It was post 9/11. There was just a lot of negativity. And I started this as a hobby to relax in my apartment. And then I started sharing it with coworkers. But but what I would share with people is then it started to take off. Like I started to visit factories, and this was on my vacation. I'm still fully employed, bringing ice cream to work. People loved it. And then I went in to resign. I was with the CEO. We were doing, I was still relatively successful, even though the company wasn't doing well. There was no response. And he's a friend. And I went to our board and said, I'm resigning. And they were like, I said, there's no money you can offer me. This is not like I'm going to a competitive job.
Right.
I'm leaving. And at that time, it was not cool to have a food startup. Like today it is. But 20 years
I don't even
ago,
know if it is so cool today. Although you can make that train go, but
not many people were doing it. So, I think that, and I know, they said to me, yeah, Paul, we realize this has been a tough journey. This is kind of like a sabbatical. We'll see you, we'll see you in a year.
you'll be back.
You'll be back, and, but I think there was a watershed moment of it was like, you know what, this is something I really found that I'm interested in and I'm really passionate. And the train wouldn't stop. So I'm like, it's now or never, and I'm going to do it. And who knows what'll happen. And there are such a long, crazy list of stories along the way of a journey that this, took wrong turns and all kinds of things happened. But
Yeah.
I think my opinion about this experience is it's being involved in it, stuff happens. So like, look, I really did get involved. I was visiting factories. And the more I talked to people, the more I got involved in it, the more other opportunities came to me that may not have in this sector, that may not have been possible. And I think whether you're my thought is if you're whether looking to change or you've been a person who's lost your, current employment, you're looking for the next thing.
Yeah.
It's so hard. But if you start to get active and involved, and I've gone through ups and downs throughout the history of this business, when I'm active and I'm talking and I'm out there working in the industry and I'm talking to people about development, stuff happens. And sometimes it's unexpected. And when I'm in my shell and I'm focused only on, I've got all of these things in front of me that are a problem, I got to solve that, and I'm not involved outside of it, guess what? Not much happens.
Right.
And
You're
so
busy, whether you're visible or not, you're in something, whether you
you're
are.
in exactly, and whether that's a job search or thinking about another career, but it was being involved, and I recall us just talking to industry people, talking to farmers, and all of this was crazy. There was everybody's like, "You're never going to do this. Like this doesn't make any sense. Why
Yeah.
would you do this?" And
Right.
then things happened. Like an opportunity came to get the equipment. A small example. I was looking at spending my life savings at the time to buy equipment, and like it mathematically didn't make sense. But I was really looking, touring factories, touring, places that made the equipment. And guess what? I came upon one that was for auction in Grand Central Station, and I knew exactly what it was. I knew exactly how much it was worth, and I bought it in a crazy auction, and I paid a tenth of the price, and it didn't work well, but I fixed it. And who knew? But that would have never happened if I wasn't active.
If
Never
you
would.
weren't active, if you weren't preparing, sort of.
I wasn't preparing. I wasn't learning.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
I
If you
wasn't
aren't.
dreaming big. I dreamed so many times of like, how would I own a factory? How would I build a factory? I toured multi-million-dollar factories when they would let me in the door. I'd knock on the door and ask
Yeah.
for a tour.
Yeah.
And then when time came, when I saw a plant, like I knew how it would look. And guess what? What didn't turn out to be, I didn't have to build it, but I saw it within a dairy that we wanted to work with. They had the equipment. I'm like, my goodness, this is exactly. So I kind of knew,
Yeah.
but then it was it was a different path.
Right.
So
Right. I think
I
it takes
think,
a lot of courage, because not only to speak up and say, "Hey, I'm burnt out. There's nothing's wrong here, but I want to do something different," or "I've been doing this for this amount of time. I want to do something different," or "I'm capable of doing something different." And it probably took a lot of courage on your part. What was some of the best advice and encouragement that you received at that time, if you remember? And what was some of the worst?
well, interestingly, a lot of people are like, "Oh, your parents. Like, what are your parents going to say?" Because college school, giving up. Like I literally went from making a good salary to like I was making like $200 a week when this got started,
Yes.
and I figured out a way to make that work. I was blessed by finding a path to make that. But my parents were the best advice. They were like, oh, it's about time. They were like, my
Really?
parents are not people of me. My father was a minister. My mom was a social worker, and they're like, you're doing something you want to do, and like they saw the passion in it. And maybe at the time, I wasn't a community aspect to it yet. They're like, it's about time. You're doing something you want to really do, and you're not just doing it for earning a salary. So like that was super encouraging. My parents
That
were,
is super encouraging. Let me just pause and just talk about how rare that is. And I don't pretend to know how old you are, but parents of that generation, of people of presumably our generation,
yes, yes, exactly,
are not
exactly.
out there saying, go pursue your dreams, money be gone. This is not an issue. And also the expected ROI on the educational path to get you to where you are. And not because they don't want to encourage you, but because they're so focused on managing risk. But that's really rare for your parents to do that. Did you learn or pick up on any aspects of entrepreneurship and or risk taking from your family dynamic that you think suit
Well,
this?
you know, interest maybe not, and maybe so. Like, so my parents are not into business whatsoever. They have no. My dad immigrated from India with $5 in his pocket, and was going to pursue. This is the interesting part. He was going to pursue a career in geology and oil exploration. He was a very smart chemist, but along the way, he ended up having a revelation that he wanted to pursue being a minister. That's what he became, and spent his whole life in service for other people. And so I think that may be part of it, that they were risk takers, not in a business way, but in a life way. you know and I don't think he looked at it through that lens
Literally
at all.
moving to the US with $5 in your pocket.
Yeah, no, well, the typical, very, common immigrant story, but, unique to your own family, and I think that having opportunity to do things. So like that was a big deal. I think that transported that they believed you could do whatever you wanted to do, that life wasn't about pursuing necessarily financial gain, because my parents did not have financial gain. And I guess the other aspect is my parents, though, were comfortable with people. I never got from them anything of jealousy towards. They're involved with the community, involved with people who are much wealthier than them, invited to their homes, and never ever got the feeling and the truth that they were like feeling that they needed to pursue that because someone else had it. So it's a gift I got from them. They provided it unconsciously, I think. It's just the
Yeah.
way they lived. So it's very fortunate, and they did not. Their worry is: are you living a good life? Are you taking care of yourself? Obviously, but we're not. They were not at all like, well, you need to achieve X, Y, and Z. Um,
I think that's remarkable.
that was the best gift I could have had along the way of this.
Yeah. So take me back to 18-year-old Paul, and he's going to college. And where did he go? Why did he pick his course of study? And what was in his mind?
Oh, well, 18-year-old Paul, yes. I wanted to be in business, and I think part of wanting to be in business, and I even picked a different political affiliation than my parents at the time, was kind of like a rejection to the opposite of what I just told you. Like, they were not worried about money; they were worried about doing service. And like, I'm like, how do you be different from that? And so I had this interest in business from my early high school days, and my parents, they were good in that. My dad had a very good contact who was CEO of a company that he had ministered to their family, and he said, I don't know what to do with my son, like, why don't you talk to him about business? And that's where I got my inspiration to study accounting. And this was one person whose advice was 100% correct as well. He took me to dinner on my own, and he's a very successful person I looked up to, who had never finished college, but
Hmm.
rose up to become a CEO. And he said, Paul, go and study. I wanted to study business. He said, what do you mean business? What are you going to do? He said, you should go study accounting and get an accounting degree. And I was like, why? It sounds boring. Like, he said, because not many people really pursue accounting. And two, he says, they always bring the accountant along, even if you're not qualified to be in the room. He said, you'll be in the room because you're the accounting guy, and because nobody else does it. And he says, you probably shouldn't even be in that room, but you'll be there. And he was 1,000%. I can't tell you how many rooms. So I pursued accounting. And I ended up getting a degree in accounting, worked for a big public accounting firm in New York City. But he was 1,000% correct. I had no idea what I was doing, and I would be in these boardrooms with people. I'm the guy from accounting,
Right.
and I got a
All
lot
from
of exposure.
everything. But you're on every deal. You're looking at
Yep.
all the terms. You're tracking the negotiations all the way through.
It's 1,000%. So having a skill like that meant, you were going to be in the room, and that happened.
Yeah.
That happened,
So
and
glad that
yes,
I'm sure you're glad. I'm glad that you didn't dismiss that advice. I give similar advice to people about pursuing careers in sales. That in the beginning of your career, if you're looking for a first opportunity, sales might also be something. The whole notion of this show is to dismiss the idea that there are small beginnings, that really to underscore the fact that even the smallest of beginnings or first jobs can really unpack and unlock opportunity in the future. Were there other jobs that you
yeah, that's true.
had?
Yeah, that is also, if I look back now, being an older employee, whatever age I
Yeah,
am, looking back
yeah,
on many years, there's several that were, you'd think were nothing. So when I chose to go to a public state university in Pennsylvania, Bloomsburg University, it was all, my parents' budget, my own could afford. And I got a job during school, and I was a forklift driver at a giant food or agricultural distribution center. And I became a pretty good.
baked from the beginning.
Yeah. And I became, yeah, exactly, it was. And yeah, I became a very good, working on the docks at this place, literally loading trucks with bags of seed. It was really physical job. But you know what? I learned a lot from that job. I worked with people that never finished school. I worked with people that would be in those jobs probably till they retired. And I learned the value of people at every level. And like, I had to have a lot of respect for these guys because they knew things I didn't know about what they were doing. And that a lot of them really focused on doing the best they could at that job. And it made a difference. Look, that company had no sales if we didn't load the truck right. Like it mattered. And so, my takeaway from that experience, not only I learned how to operate some equipment, but which I did use later when I had to drive my own forklift to load the ice cream. But I learned about, how important everyone's role is in a system. And like to us today in the ice cream business, guess who's extremely important to me? It's the person who's working at that Whole Foods or that Wegmans who's putting our pint on the shelf. Because
Mhm.
without them, it doesn't sell.
When you look at growing your organization, what are some of the two or three characteristics for people that have to that you get to work with? I like to say I like to work with smart and curious people who will happily and joyously go down the rabbit hole, and that are, have a bias for action. They get stuff done. No E for effort or A for effort. It's A for execution, and have an energy about things. Well, what are some of the things that you look for?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of those things kind of strike similar boxes. I mean, certainly, one of them is just a real curiosity and ask questions and come up with your own ideas and that intellectual curiosity. But they also like, we're not just here to follow something to get a paycheck. Like this is everybody's got to dig their hands in it. Everybody can contribute better ways to do something. So that is really important. And then the other aspect is, we just do what we do, and you're going to do it. Like there's no, I think that there's no A for effort kind of thing. It's really like, dig in, do it, come up to the solution, execute it, and it's not something. I love when people solve problems, and it's not something I came up with. Like
Yeah,
that's great. Like that's the independence of mind. That I have a lot of experience to add. And say, look, that may not work because I've already been down that road before. So like that's really important. And I think the other part for us is a real respect for people at all, whoever you're going to interact with at every level, whether they're higher than the lower level with the store, because that's you want to be known as, look, at the very minimum, it's great ice cream and the people are nice to work with. So we want to take their phone call or we
yeah,
want to talk to them. And that's extremely important. And so, and level of, I've learned that, level of degree or academic achievement's important, but it's not necessarily the marker. I've got people that work with me who've barely been through college, they have unbelievable talents that, that, or, they're channeled in a different way. And so
Yeah.
um, that's
I
how I
think,
look at it.
yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I've long believed that college is a throughway to career. It's not a destination. And so, in a lot of other countries, it's just a choice. It's not stigmatized. The high school to career pathway is not stigmatized in the way that it often is here. And there are lots of different ways to have a successful career. And there are lots of different ways to start. Can you talk about the decision, the decision to take the opportunity to start to bring forward a social impact messaging in your product? And what did that take for you? How hard was that a leap for you? Because I would imagine in some cases, people try to be safe, run it right down the line. I'm going to put forward, I want to sell as much ice cream as possible. I don't want ice cream. I don't want any politics in my ice cream. I don't want any social
Okay.
impact in my ice cream. So what was that for you?
Yeah, I mean, look, the first impetus was the Syrian Dane walnut, and it really struck me as a chord as having my dad immigrating here. My mom's family actually dates back like to the Mayflower, so I represent two levels of immigration, oldest and newest of.
Yeah.
But what was happening at the time that was inspired was there was this, the giant noise of like the Syrian refugees, or like
Sure.
these people are, they were held out, and there wasn't that many of them even that were coming into the U.S. compared to other countries. But there was this, these are people that are going to be terrorists, and they're going to come and destroy our lives and destroy our country, and they're hidden in here to go to war with us. I'm like, it's absolutely not true. Like they were
Mhm.
just no different than anybody. They were no different they were different from my father. My father didn't leave a war, but and so like this was just this whole thing came to my head of, and the other part that also came to my head was my father's experience was that I asked him, he had many opportunities to do very well going to other countries, to immigrate to England, to Saudi Arabia, and it took him years to get to. I said, why did you wait to come to the U.S.? And he said, because in the U.S. he said that I will probably always be a foreigner, even if I become a citizen. He says, but my children will be Americans. And he says, you go to anywhere else, he says, you won't be English ever. He said, so, and that came true. I'm like, look what I've done because of that opportunity. That doesn't exist anymore. So like all of that was in my head. And so the Syrian dating walnut came about because we tried, my wife and her family's Muslim. So for Eid, we found this baker, he was a Syrian refugee in Brooklyn. He made all these pastries. I ordered all of them and they are amazing. And I'm like, how do I make this and do something? How do I make this into an ice cream? And I went to see him. I found him. I had a friend who was Egyptian. He only spoke Arabic. I had to have a friend come and translate. We were in his kitchen showing me how he makes these baked goods. But food, I didn't need to understand Arabic. We can understand each other. And so I decided wanted to use inspired by his recipe to make this ice cream, Syrian
Yeah.
day walnut. So I'm making him, but I'm like, but then I was like, how do I do something? At that time, I wanted to have a voice. I'm like,
Hmm.
I'm not a politician. I don't have a lot of money. Let me change his ice cream to deliver a message. And that was the message. That's why on the face of it, it's the colors of our flag, which is subtle, but it
Hmm.
also has peace in Arabic, English, and Hebrew. Because in Syria, people of all those faiths and people in the Middle East eat this treat, mamul, which is the treat he made with this date paste, and they enjoy it. And they are of different faiths. They have war. And I'm like, that is the message. These people all enjoy this one food, and it crosses all of those faiths. But also, it was a way to tell the Syrian refugee story and explain, look what's coming from somebody who came from Syria. This like making
Yeah.
this ice cream. And then and it led then further as to I got involved with the IRC through some people, and so we donated half of the profits to the IRC for, over these years. It's for small, but it's big for us of what we did, and it was a message. And it wanted to have people start to have these conversations about, look, Syrians are just another group of arrogants, or look at this flavor. At least spark some conversation. So there was kind of no holding me back, to be honest. I was
Right.
like, I was going to tell the story, but and I'll tell it really quickly. The black raspberry, I was a little more afraid because
Hmm.
I work with a lot of people on a different political perspective, farmers, drivers, all types of folks. And so the main farmers that make the ice cream that work with us, I know he's a very conservative, long time. He's a long time Republican. He's, no And when I made that package, I was really nervous, but I go, I have to show it to him because the package was this purple, and it talks about that, the American dream is it's for all people, and it's on Main Street, not just Wall Street, and and we're really there's more that unites us than divides us when we really look at it. And I gave him the cup, and I was like, my God, I might lose everything. He might say, I'm not going to work
Right.
with you.
Right.
And he read it, and then he paused, and he's like, I really like the poem. And we started laughing. We found one commonality at the time. I
Yeah.
said, Dalton, I keep getting emails from everybody on my side of the political arena that tells me the world's going to end if you win. And he said he starts laughing, and he's like, I get the same emails every day. So, but I was like, and there are there are issues. Some people don't like it, and most of my message is not one way is right, one way is wrong. Mine is, if we
Right.
come and find our commonalities, we can negotiate through,
Right.
issues that are different.
You're emerging talent early in your career, but you have and you've got a job, right? A good job. Your family's really proud. Your mother's telling everybody that you are the president of the organization and just started as an analyst. And there's a lot of people who are invested in where you are today, but you've got this big idea to make, ice cream, and it won't go away, and you want to pursue it. What is the advice that you give to that person?
Think the first piece is to learn everything you can, is to just keep learning and being involved about your what you want to pursue, and if you're pursuing it from that perspective, that you're hungry, that you really love this, that it's something you can't keep it quiet, it's going to happen. You just have to keep going. I think if I had started this from the aspect of, this is how much money I'm going to return, and this is how the business will grow, which is important to measure, but like, if that's the initial impetus, I think that's tough. You may be successful, but I don't think you'll be in the long run of doing it. So
Yeah.
I think being passionate, learning as much as you can, and take people's advice, and some of the doubters' advice is good too. There's lots of people along the way early on, like, this is not a good idea. Probably, like,
You're nuts. Don't do this.
they're nuts. There's no financial return for it. Was before this whole, like, local food thing was starting and all that. None of that existed at the time. So people were
Yeah.
like, really, like, what are you talking about here? And that's okay. It's okay. I think sometimes I feel the more, that kind of warning you get, maybe you're onto something.
Hmm.
So keep going.
Keep
And I
going.
think the other really valuable thing is, don't burn any bridges with your current employers, because I have had to work for my former employers many times when I needed some extra money when this was early, and called them up and said, can I be a staff, whatever I need to do. I'll do whatever
Right.
for you, because I needed to
Right.
make money during the off season. So, and the other piece would be, you know, think about how you would financially make it work.
Yeah.
Like, can you do this openly, and share it with your current employer if it's something you're going to do at the same time. You don't want to be doing it, without, disclosing what you're up to, as long as it's not competitive, I guess. But, that's the other aspect is, figuring out, I got rid of my apartment. I started to do things to prepare that I wasn't going to have income to start, or much. So preparing, that's important.
Yeah. Yeah. Without giving away too many secrets, what's next for Adirondack Creamery?
What's next? Well, I think we've got a couple of new flavors we're trying to roll out, and also trying to develop the next flavor that we could share with with a great message. We've had a theme of these messages, but that has to tie in. So, and then I think for the ice cream company itself too, is to share that on a different scale too. So we're sharing it on the shelf, um, and people get the ice cream, but now it's, I'm also looking at ways like, how do we share more about the flavors, the company, but this message,
Yeah.
of bringing people together, and whether that's through actually doing events or being a part of other people's events, that it can be one of the mediums or the medium to have people have these discussions. So, like, that's where we're going, because that's the next piece that I think, is there, that I'm feeling that we need to do, and it's something that we can offer.
Well, congratulations on it all. As ice cream lover and a new fan of Adirondack Creamery, I will be the taste tester for the next batch.
We can make that happen. Now we know your address. We can make it happen.
Yes, absolutely. Paul, thank you so much for being with us.
It was great to be here, and thank you for offering this wonderful podcast to share with people and inspire them for their, for the current or next journey.
Your First Job is a production of Giant Steps LLC, a company working at the intersection of strategy, culture, career, and education. I'm Leilani Brown, CEO and host of the show. Many thanks to our executive producer, Sam Osborne, and Maxwell Brown for producing our show music and this episode. You can learn more about our company and the podcast by visiting giantstepsllc.com. Thank you for listening.